about doing this presentation until today. The presentation has been changing on a regular basis because daily we're getting new regulations coming out. Once the regulations come out, everyone reads them and isn't quite sure exactly how to apply them, exactly what everything means. So we have to wait to get some clarification from the government on some of the provisions. And so I'm actually really glad that our originally scheduled meeting of Thursday changed to today, because we got a lot of clarification from the Department of Labor on one of the new leave provisions just that Thursday evening. So I'm hoping that the presentation today will answer many of your questions and address many of the challenges that small businesses are facing today. But as Nicole said, if we do run out of time, I do invite you to submit your questions. I will try to email you all back responses to your questions. I will do that as quickly as I can, and hopefully we can get through this difficult time together. So to get started, I have changed, as I said, I've changed the presentation a bit to take some materials out that I had in there before. So one of the issues that was a hot topic a week and a half ago is which businesses are covered by the isolation mandate and who has to stay home, who can go into the offices and the workplaces. At this point, it seems that most employers have figured that out. Governor Newsom did issue some guidelines that go into a lot of detail about what types of businesses are exempted from the isolation order. So again, if that's something that's affecting your business and you're still uncertain about it, feel free to shoot me a question and I can send you more information. I did want to touch on employee privacy. This is something that's come up from a lot of businesses wondering what they should do if they find out that someone in their workplace has either been diagnosed with COVID-19 or who may have been exposed to it. I think the immediate reaction that most people have is, I need to properly inform their coworkers, therefore I need to tell them who it was. But privacy protections are still in place in the workplace. Therefore, what you should do is you certainly can tell your employees, if your employees are still working together in any type of a group setting, to let you know if they're sick at all, really, because they may have the symptoms and not have a diagnosis. So just to let you know if they're sick. If they're sick, they should stay home. You don't need to go into what their symptoms are. Just let them know that if they're not feeling well at this point in time, it's best to stay home. If they've been diagnosed, they can let you know, or if they've had an exposure to the coronavirus, they should let you know. At that point in time, you can talk a little bit to the employee about who they've had exposure to recently, and then please let all of those employees, vendors, anyone else that they may have been in contact with know that they have had a potential exposure, but do not reveal the name of the employee. Work from home guidelines are important because a lot of workplaces have now moved, due to the isolation mandate, have moved their employees to working from home. So again, I'm not going to go into as much detail on this as I had originally intended to, but having a good work from home policy is important, making sure that your employees understand what the expectations are while they're working from home. So it's a good idea to let them know, what are the expected business hours? So in other words, when do they need to be available to work? When do you have to be able to get in touch with them? You can ask them to stay logged into their email, to Slack, to any other types of communications that you're using. Ask them to respond promptly. Make sure that they're set up with computers and any other types of equipment they may need at home. And of course, they need to keep company information confidential. So it's better if you can have IT set up secure systems for them, if you have the ability to do that. One really important note here is home office expenses. So now that your employees are working at home, you are responsible for paying a portion of their home office expenses. So if they have any actual expenses, for instance, if they need to get ink for their printer or something like that based on the work that they're doing, then you do expense that, have them submit their receipts, and you will pay them back for those office expenses. Cell phone and home internet are also two other expenses that you do have to pay for your employees. And the state of California already has a regulation that says that you do have to pay a reasonable percentage of cell phone costs when your employees are using their cell phones for work. And that is going to apply to home internet use as well. So the way that the reasonable percentage is determined is most of the time companies have an idea of how much time their employees are using their cell phones, and they may pay a portion of their bill or a percentage of their bill. Or in looking at what cell phone and home internet expenses might be, you may say that it's reasonable to pay maybe 50% of that you feel that they're using those devices for about 50% of the time for your for work purposes. And so what companies can do to help document their decisions is just do some online research as to the cost of cell phone subscriptions and also home internet. Determine what percentage you're going to use to reimburse them, and then go ahead and let them know that you will be reimbursing them on their paychecks. It will be a reimbursement, so it won't be taxable on their paychecks. So they can either do paychecks or they can do it through their expense report. So generally, we've been seeing most companies with cell phones coming out somewhere between $20 to $50 a month for cell phone usage, and the home internet. Most of my clients have been asking them what numbers they've been coming up with, and a lot of times they're doing this in conjunction with their finance teams, and most of them are coming up more around the range of $20 to $30 a month per employee. Compensation when employees are working from home. So again, you want to reiterate with your hourly workers that they need to record all actual time worked as they would if they were reporting into the workplace. They should also still be recording their breaks and also their meal periods. Salaried employees always have to be paid for an entire week if they do any work at all during the work week. So if they're answering emails, doing anything at all, you do have to pay them their full week salary, unless for some reason, you know, at this point in time, people aren't really taking vacations and that type of thing. But if they were using PTO, you would be able to take some time out of their PTO banks. At this point in time, you should be paying them for the entire work week, unless they're on a reduced work schedule. So reducing work schedules is something else that is happening throughout the Bay Area. Employers are faced with downturns in their business. So some employees can't work from home because their job requires them to report to work. In other cases, it's due to the downturn in business. So there are reduced work schedules. With hourly employees, this is pretty easy. You just go ahead and pay them for the actual hours that they're working. If you have salaried employees and you're cutting their hours, you know, as I mentioned, if they've done any work in the work week, you do have to pay them for the whole work week. And so if the amount of work that you are having them do during the week has been reduced and you are going to be cutting their salaries commensurate with the amount of work that they're doing, then you can convert them to non-exempt status or hourly status during the period of the health emergency. So you particularly need to do this if your employees are falling below the exempt salary thresholds. And so I have those listed there for you. If they are going to fall below that when you reduce their salaries due to reduced work, you do want to convert them to non-exempt. And then also just make sure that you give them notification of all of the non-exempt rules, such as overtime pay, as well as their meal and rest break guidelines. So you may want to take your non-exempt pay policies and forward those to your newly non-exempt employees. And for pay reductions, again, in some cases, companies, in an attempt to reduce their costs, are maybe not reducing work hours, or in conjunction with reducing work hours, they are reducing people's pay. Be careful with your hourly people that you don't go below your local minimum wage requirements. and then watch those exempt thresholds for your salaried employees and convert them to non-exempt. If you do convert to non-exempt, make sure as soon as the crisis is over and people are returning to their normal work schedules, that you then return your exempt workers to their regular exempt status. Definitely document your decision-making process. Anytime that we're going to be making changes to people's compensation, you want to make sure that you're being fair and equitable, that there's no discrimination in making your decisions. So if you're going to be reducing people's pay, you always want to document what criteria you use to determine who would be included in those pay reductions. Now, looking at the types of leave that people can take, California paid sick leave does apply to most small employers, and it can be used for illnesses associated with COVID-19. Also for caring for family members. And this does also include self-quarantine if there's been an exposure. So in other words, if someone has been exposed and a doctor tells them that they need to self-quarantine and they are not able to work as a result, they would be able to use their paid sick leave for that. Likewise, if people have been traveling in high-risk areas, so if there are people who have been returning from business trips or vacations and their area is listed as being a high-risk area for the coronavirus, then again, they can use sick leave for that quarantine period if they're unable to work from home during the quarantine period. California vacation leave, also in California, if you do provide PTO or vacation for your employees, based on your policies, you may allow them to take some paid time off for COVID-19 related issues. And so again, just take a look at your policies, what the policies can be used for. One important point with using PTO is that you can't require employees to exhaust their paid sick leave under the California paid sick leave provisions before using their vacation or PTO. So they have the option to choose which one they want to use. Employees also cannot be required to use PTO for business closures without giving them 90 days notice. So if you have had to shut down your operations, you can allow your employees to use their PTO, but you will not be able to require them to use the PTO because we did not have a 90-day notice period for this health crisis. So benefits become a big issue. If you have people who are on furlough, and we're going to go through what a furlough is in just a little bit, but if you have people who are on furlough, so they are not working, or if people's hours have been reduced and they are now working less than 30 hours, they're considered part-time employees. Most plans, health benefit plans, cover 30 hours or more. Some plans are set up to cover employees down to 20 hours a week. So you do have to check and see what your policy covers. If employees do lose their eligibility because they are not working or because they have dropped to part-time status, you may have to send them COBRA notices. Some employers have asked, can I pay for my employees' COBRA? Because even though they're not working, we want to be able to make sure that they still have their health benefits. Yes, you can absolutely do that. You can make arrangements through your COBRA administrator or through your health insurance carrier to pay for people's COBRA expenses. One important little catch with this is that when employees elect COBRA, and then drop their COBRA, if they're on the federal COBRA or if they're on the California CalCOBRA program, if they drop that coverage mid-year and then want to go onto the California exchange program, they may not be able to do that. So what seems like a really nice thing to do for someone can cause some complications, because if employees do go on the COBRA, which tends to be quite expensive and you are paying for it on their behalf, and then they end up unemployed as a result of this action, and or you can no longer pay the COBRA. So in other words, you're only paying it for a month or 2 months, and then at that point they need to take it over. They may not be able to go onto the California Exchange program until open enrollment, which is at the end of the year. Because dropping COBRA, voluntarily dropping COBRA, is not a qualifying event to go on the California Healthcare Exchange, Covered California. Covered California has, however, extended their open enrollment to a special open enrollment through the end of June. But it's definitely a consideration if you feel that you're going to be paying for people's COBRA and then leaving them in a position after a few months where they may have to continue to pay those high COBRA premiums. So it's worth having a discussion with the employees on those options if you are going to pay for COBRA coverage. A lot of carriers right now are very kindly agreeing to extend coverage under their plans for employees who normally would have lost eligibility. So in other words, a lot of carriers are saying if you have furloughed your workers as a result of the health crisis, or if you've had to reduce their hours, we will allow you to keep them active on your plans through certain dates. And I've seen dates, most of them either through the beginning of May, and I actually have seen some through the beginning of June. This does vary by carrier, and so what you want to do is make sure that you contact your broker or your carrier directly and ask them, you know, if you have Anthem, if you have Kaiser, if you have Blue Shield, any of the other carriers, will they allow your furloughed or part-time employees to stay with active coverage, and until what date? So that creates a great opportunity in some cases. Some carriers are also currently offering special open enrollment periods. And so what this typically involves is opening up open enrollment at a time when you typically wouldn't have it, to allow employees who had either previously declined coverage or who may have signed up for employee-only coverage and want to add family members. So it's not necessarily a full open enrollment. If you have people who are still in their waiting periods, the rules do vary by carrier, but it's worth asking, again, your broker or your carrier if there is a special open enrollment period. The special open enrollment periods that I have been seeing are actually quite short. Applications need to be submitted by the end of this week, by April 3rd. So if you think that this is something you'd like to offer to your employees, I encourage you to get in touch with your broker as soon as possible. Alternatives to COBRA for employees who may be losing coverage and your small business is not in a position to be able to help them with the cost of the COBRA. It is very expensive, so it's nice to be able to let your employees know that there are some options for them. So if they have a spouse or domestic partner whose employer plan allows enrollment for domestic partners, then they would be able to enroll within 30 days of their loss of coverage. They just want to make sure that they keep an eye on that date. Notify the employer plan that they are losing their coverage through your company, and that should be a qualifying event for them to enroll on their spouse or partner's plan. The Covered California program that I was talking about is also much lower cost than the COBRA plan. They are individual and family plans. The special enrollment period has been extended to June 30th. And the nice thing about Covered California as well is that for people who are having limited incomes due to loss of employment, there are some subsidies that may be available for them to make this much more cost effective. And Medi-Cal is also another option. This is an income-based option for people that are in lower income groups. But applying for it, it does take effect very quickly, in fact, almost immediately. So that may be an option for people as well. If you have employees who are on a furlough, so they are not working right now, so they don't have paychecks, what do you do if your employees pay a portion of the premiums for their benefits? Maybe they're paying a part of their own premium, or maybe they're paying for their dependents through your payroll. You have a couple of options here. you can require them to continue to pay their premiums on a monthly basis. And typically this is done by having them just submit a check. So you would basically send them an invoice, give them a 30-day grace period to make the payment, and then they can pay you for those premiums. That is an after-tax option. Most employers do have pre-tax plans in place that allow their employees to pay for their premiums on a pre-tax basis. So if you're able to do so, you may want to allow your employees to defer the payments of premiums that they owe to you or owe to the company, and then repay it on the pre-tax basis through their payroll after they return to work once the crisis is over. Furloughs and layoffs are a couple of options that have been coming up a lot as companies either cannot accommodate work for their employees because the employees are unable to report to the workplace due to the isolation mandates, or it may also be because of downturn in business due to the crisis. A lot of businesses are unable to operate and they are suffering greatly economically. And as a result, they do unfortunately have to make decisions to put their employees on a furlough or to even lay off some of their workforce. So the difference between the two is a furlough is typically a finite point or finite duration. So basically what you're saying to your employees is you are not going to be working, you are not going to be paid, but we do expect to be able to return you to work on X date. And a lot of companies in the Bay Area have been using the current April 7th date for the isolation mandate. I do firmly believe that will be moving out. I know that today Mayor Breed in San Francisco extended it to May 1st, and in general, I do believe that the local counties will be extending that isolation mandate. The one thing to keep in mind with furloughs with your salaried employees is you can absolutely put them on a furlough where they are not going to be working, but don't forget the rule with exempt salaried employees that you have to pay them if they do any work during the week. So if they work on Monday and you institute a furlough on Tuesday, you're still going to have to pay your salaried employees for a full week of work. So if you're able to do some careful planning, you want to institute your furloughs before your work week begins, especially with respect to your salaried employees. You may allow for continuation of benefits, again, talking with your broker or your carrier to find out, can my furloughed employees stay on their benefits plans and for how long? Also, some people have been a little nervous about using furloughs because they don't associate it with actual unemployment. It's not a layoff, it's a temporary reduction in work where they're not working for a period of time. They are eligible for unemployment benefits. And so you don't have to be concerned about that. Another nice thing is that if it is a furlough situation, they will not be required to seek other employment while receiving unemployment benefits. Typically, when you're receiving unemployment, you do have to show that you're looking for other work to get the benefits. Due to the COVID-19 crisis, the EDD has waived that requirement if it is a temporary furlough. If you do a layoff, as with any layoff, you should carefully document your selection process and the criteria you use to choose the employees who'd be laid off. Don't forget to give them their final pay on the date that they're notified of the layoff. Make sure you give them their COBRA notices. And for most small group plans, their coverage is usually in place through the end of the month, but you just want to make sure with your plans that that is a fact before you communicate that to your employees. Unemployment, if you do have a layoff, is available for people who are laid off, who are furloughed, and also for employees who have reduced work hours. So again, if you don't have enough work for your employees, but you're able to keep them partially employed, please go ahead and do so and encourage them to apply for unemployment. They can receive some benefits. It depends on how much they're making and also how much of an hour reduction they have. Some employees may not actually receive anything if you're still paying them enough. But I encourage everyone who's got reduced hours to get themselves into the California unemployment system as soon as possible, because there is a federal supplement to unemployment of $600 a week. Exactly how that will be applied to reduced hours is not clear yet. However, that is a benefit we want everyone to be able to take advantage of. So I encourage everybody to get into the system if they have reduced hours or they are not working. The EDD also has something called a work share program. It allows you to reduce hours for your workforce without having to lay people off. It's something that you have to apply for. The benefit of it is that they do pay more under the work share program than if an employee just applies for reduced hours. It has to affect 10% of your workforce, or at least 2 employees, your workforce or a work unit within your workforce. The hours and wages have to be reduced by at least 10%, but they can't exceed 60%. So if this would work well for your organization, I encourage you to take a look, and I do have links for you to the EDD website where you can read more about the requirements and how the EDD work share program works. Also, as your employee, you can let your employees know that as they complete the application online, COVID-19 has been added as a reason for a layoff or furlough or a reduction in hours. So you want to make sure that your employees who are being laid off due to the health crisis do choose that reason. If they do, then the 1-week waiting period for benefits will be waived, and also that requirement to seek other employment during a temporary furlough or reduced hours will be waived. There are some required documents. So again, if you reduce people's hours or if they are laid off, you need to give them a notice of change of relationship form. And that's something that I can make available to Nicole so that you can access it. And then there's also an EDD booklet called For Your Benefit that you need to give to them when they file for their unemployment. We also have some great resources for employees who are being laid off. And thank you very much to Pat Richards, who reached out. Pat works with NOVA, and there are a couple of resources, NOVA and America's Job Centers, that are available for employees who find themselves without work. They can provide great support for the employees. We're actually going to have some brochures about the programs, again, available to all of you. Nicole is going to make that available for you. And so this is great information to share with your employees as they begin to start looking for new positions if you do have to let them go. The federal unemployment that I mentioned is $600 a week up to 39 weeks. The California unemployment currently is 26 weeks. It's going to be administered through the state unemployment program. So again, because our state does allow for reduced hour pay, we do believe that there will be a benefit there for those folks as well. Now, one of the really big things that you've probably been seeing a lot about, and if you haven't, it's something that you need to know about because it applies to employers of every size that have less than 500 employees. So this is most small businesses, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or the FFCRA, which was signed into law at the end of last week. So what this does is it expands to paid leave benefits. So these are benefits that are going to be available to your employees, and they are paid leave. There are 2 different types of leave. The first one is 2 weeks of leave for sick. It's a sick leave policy, and it applies to illness, quarantines, and also school closures. In addition to that, there's a 12-week FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act provision that allows up to 12 weeks for school closures, again, or child care closures. Now, you may be saying, I have less than 50 employees, I'm not subject to FMLA. Well, this FMLA provision does apply to all employers, even those that are below 50. The effective date of this is April 1st. This is in bold because a lot of information that was coming out last week said April 2nd. Once it was written into law, April 1st is the actual date that this will be enacted. There is a notice that has to be posted if your business is closed. You may email it, you can post it on an intranet or an external website, and you can physically mail it to your employees, but you need to do that by April 1st. And I do have a link in the resources at the end of this presentation that you can click on that will bring you right to that notice that you can send to your employees. One nice thing about this is everyone is panicking about the idea of having to pay for these leaves, is that you will get your money back in most situations for paying out these leaves to your employees, and it's done with tax credits. So we'll go through that. The other thing is that, again, less than 500 employees. How do you calculate 500 employees right now? It wasn't perfectly clear, but right now, the prevailing thought is that how many employees did you have on the date when the employee requests the leave? Exemptions. So again, it can be a huge financial burden on small employers, and especially very small employers that have less than 50 employees. There is an exemption provided just for pay for the school closures or daycare situations. What hasn't happened yet is there has not been a process released as to how you can claim this exemption. There is nothing that you file with the government right now. What they want you to do is they want you to just keep documentation of why implementing this pay for school closures or childcare closures would affect the viability of your business as an ongoing concern. So in other words, if it would have such an impact on your business that you would have to close because of making these payments, it's a pretty high threshold, but again, it may apply. And in that case, you just need to keep your financial records that will show that, because eventually they will ask for information. Right now, they just don't have a process in place to gather that information or even to say exactly what's going to be required. The employees that are eligible for these leaves, all employees are entitled to the sick leave, no matter how long they've worked for you and whether they're full-time or part-time. Employees for the extended FMLA leave have to have been employed for 30 days, so 30-day employees. One thing that you will need to collect from your employees in order to get this tax credit, we'll go over the tax credit in a minute, but in order to be eligible to receive repayment from the government for the money that you are paying your employees for these leaves, you will need documentation that has all of this basic information on it. And in some cases, if there is a quarantine or an isolation order that they get because a doctor has said that they need to quarantine or isolate, then they will need a copy of that. The name of the healthcare provider can be used, because right now it's very difficult to get documents from doctors. In fact, we don't want to be asking doctors to spend time preparing documents. They have much more important things to be doing, taking care of people. And then if it is due to a school closure, you just need the notice that the parent received telling them that the school or the daycare facility is closed. The paid sick leave, there are 6 reasons for using the paid sick leave. The first one is the one that was causing a lot of issues. It says that the employee is subject to a government-imposed quarantine or isolation order. And immediately people thought, well, I've got a lot of people who are at home and not working because of the county isolation order and the state isolation order, and is this going to apply? It does not if your employees are at home and healthy. What this applies to is if a doctor says an employee needs to either self-quarantine, isolate, because they do have symptoms. So it doesn't apply to worksite closures. They have to be unable to work or to do telework due to one of these reasons as well. So again, if they can be set up to work at home, they won't meet the eligibility criteria. Also, if they've been advised by a healthcare provider to quarantine, if they're experiencing symptoms and they're looking for a medical diagnosis. So again, it's very hard for people to get in to see doctors and get testing right now. So if an employee contacts you and says, I'm sick, I've got symptoms, I think I may have the COVID-19, then they would be eligible for the paid sick leave. So those are 1, 2, and 3. And then number 4 is rather than their own illness, it is, oh, I'm sorry, there is an error there. I need to fix number 4. I will do that before it comes back. But number 4 is taking care of a family member who has the coronavirus or the symptoms of the coronavirus. So number 4 is caring for a family member. Number 5 is childcare. And any similar condition, again, this hasn't really been fleshed out. So the reason why we want to take a look at what the different leaves are is the amount of payment that you can be reimbursed varies based on the reason that they're out. So the amount of leave that they're eligible for is 80 hours. So it's 80 hours of sick leave for a full-time employee who typically works 40 hours a week. If they work part-time, you pay them the average hours that they would have worked over a 2-week period. So if you have somebody who's working 30 hours a week, then it would be 60 hours. And there are different calculations as well if they have a varying schedule where you use a 6-month period to determine what their number of hours would be under the sick leave provision. Now, this is the reason why you want to know what the reason is. Another reason why you want to know what the reason is these are the amounts that are capped. And the reason why I say they're capped is this is the amount that you can get back from the government if you pay out this sick leave. So if the employee qualifies under any of the 6 reasons, you can pay, if their salary or their wages are more than $511 in a workday, you are welcome to pay them their full wages. However, these caps are the maximum that the government is going to reimburse you. So you have the option of either paying them their full pay, knowing that you won't get the full amount back from the government. If you can afford to do that, that's a wonderful thing to do for your people. But this is how much the government will return to you through the taxes, through tax offsets. And so it's $511 in a workday when people are out for their own health-related conditions. And reasons 4, 5, and 6, caring for others, and also the school closures, is $200 a workday is the maximum. And then the 5110 and the 2000 are the aggregate maximums. How much should you be paying them? Well, basically, again, with the employees who are non-exempt, you'll be paying them their regular rate. You do have to take into account bonuses and commissions and overtime as well. And for your salaried employees, it's just their base, just whatever their base rate was at the time that this went into, at the time that they're taking the leave. And then additional rules, this is in effect through December 31st. Unused time does not have to be paid out when they leave, like most sick pay policies. You cannot require them to use other types of leave. They have the option. And you can't ask them to ask someone else to cover their work before they can use this. They have the right to use this regardless. You will have to manage covering for them if they're currently working. And then also, of course, you cannot retaliate against people for using the sick leave. And another thing is that, as you may know, with the California paid sick leave, you are required to reflect sick leave accruals and sick leave totals on people's pay statements. And so you should be talking with your payroll company about adding a line item for this sick leave provision, this 80 hours. The extended family medical leave, again, does apply to all employers. So if you have less than 50 employees and you've never had to deal with FMLA, you now do have an FMLA obligation, but it only applies to childcare. If you have more than 50 employees, this is just adding another reason to the current FMLA provisions that you have. Childcare and having the schools closed is not covered by the usual FMLA provisions. The other difference between this and existing FMLA is that this does have a pay component associated with it. FMLA is typically unpaid time off. So again, this is all employees who've been employed for 30 calendar days. Again, if this is going to create a hardship and actually affect the viability of your company, you can seek an exemption from the Department of Labor, although exactly how you'll do that has not been issued yet. And what this is it's 12 weeks of leave if an employee is not able to care for their child because their school or the child care provider or the child care center are not available due to the health crisis. And the intermittent leave provision actually says you can use it for intermittent leave if the employer agrees. Federal FMLA for newborns and things like that requires intermittent leave. So this is different. Frankly, I don't see why you wouldn't allow that if your business operations allow for it. If you can allow your employees to reduce their schedules if they have to take care of their child maybe half the day and then they switch off with someone else in the household, it would be nice to give them that flexibility and would probably benefit the business as well. Paid during the leave. The first 2 weeks are unpaid, but if you remember, there is a provision in the paid sick leave policy that we spoke about that does allow for child care leave. And so they can claim that sick leave for the first 2 weeks, and then they would get the additional 10 weeks at 2/3 of their regular rate of pay. And then they do have the cap on this. This is the period of time that they're under the FMLA provision of $200 per workday. $10,000 is the maximum. So this is just kind of a little bit of a visual of which you would be paying under during which week. So the first week, you would be paying them under the paid sick leave provision, and then starting from week 3 through 12, they would be paid under the FMLA provision. The tax credits, again, as I mentioned, those caps that we have that I showed you can be taken off of your payroll taxes. And so in order to make this as immediate as possible, when you file your payroll taxes, you will be able to take a credit in any amount that you paid out under the sick leave or the FMLA policy. So in other words, you're basically deducting it from your payroll taxes. Initially, it was going to be covered by the Social Security and Medicare type taxes, but then they realized that that really wasn't going to cover it for a lot of small employers. And so they have extended it where it also applies to income taxes as well. So there is an example, and this is directly from the IRS. So if you owed $8,000 in payroll taxes, but you paid out to your employees $5,000 for paid sick leave or FMLA leave, then you would only be remitting $3,000 to the IRS. So you actually will be keeping the money that you had given to the employees, and you do not have to pay it to the government. So that's how they're giving you the tax credits. If the amount that you paid out exceeds your payroll taxes, then you can file for an expedited refund for the difference. And they said that that refund will be issued within 2 weeks, again, to hopefully enable employers, especially small employers, to provide these benefits and still remain a viable business. I definitely recommend talking with your tax advisor and your payroll consultants on how to claim this credit so that you can get the credit immediately. The next subject is one that is a little bit more of a finance-based conversation than HR, but I really wanted to bring it to your attention because it does have some impact on some decisions that businesses are making around laying off employees. So the CARES Act was also just recently passed, and it has a lot of different options for small business loans. So we're going to talk a little bit about the payroll-based loan that you can use, but there are also other loans available. So again, this is something that you definitely want your finance team to take a look at, see what's being made available to help your business during this difficult time. But basically what happens is under the payroll provision, payment provision, is if you keep your employees employed, and they do have different calculations, but essentially it's boiling down to keeping your payroll at about 75% of what employees were making. You're actually doing a look back to the prior year. But if you don't reduce the payroll too much and you do return your people to full pay once operations are going again, you can get a 100% forgiveness on the amounts that you're paying your employees. And so this also includes costs for things like rent and benefits. It's retroactive to February 15th, so it actually enables you to bring back employees who may have been laid off. So some more details about it is the loan is up to $10 million per applicant, but it's really based on a formula that's relative to your payroll costs. This is available for small employers with less than 500 employees. For some people, it may be of interest that it also does apply to sole proprietors, independent contractors, and other self-employed individuals. So a lot of these, sometimes the SBA loans are not available to all different types of business entities. In this case, it is extended to independent contractors and as well as sole proprietors. The loan forgiveness, again, you want to make sure that you have your finance or your tax advisor looking at all of the eligibility rules and making sure that this is being applied properly. But much of the loan can be forgiven, again, if you stay within those guidelines of how much you're reducing pay and if you're bringing people back to work once the crisis is over. So in some industries, restaurants and hotels in particular, there is some forgiveness on the size of the organization that would be covered. A nice thing about these paycheck protection loans is that there are no personal guarantees or collateral required. So it's definitely worthwhile looking into this. This is a loan that you can use to bring people back to work, to keep people working, have full forgiveness of the amounts that you are paying to your employees. If it does extend, if you don't have full forgiveness, so for instance, let's say you take out a $2 million loan and your payroll and other eligible expenses are only $1 million, that remaining $1 million that you borrowed is actually a 10-year loan period if you need to keep it, to use it to help your business. And the interest on it is not to exceed 4%. So again, I encourage everyone to take a look into the CARES Act with the guidance of your financial and tax advisors. And then this is a list of different resources that we have available for you. You can get that posting. This is the posting that you are required to share with your employees by this Wednesday, April 1st. There's information about the posting available through the FAQ. The Department of Labor FAQ is a very valuable resource. This is being updated as questions are coming up about how to apply the sick leave and the paid family leave, the FMLA. So I encourage you to keep an eye on that FAQ, and it's also very helpful in explaining how the programs work. And then there's IRS guidance on how to claim the tax credit that you will get for paying out the sick leave and paying out the FMLA leave. And then there are also links for unemployment that you can share with your employees. So we have the general unemployment website that has the online claim form. And then also, if you think that the WorkShare program may work well for you, there's a link to that program as well. And then also these local job search resources, again, thank you, courtesy of Pat Richards, of different resources for your employees who have lost their jobs so that we can help prepare them for their job search and help them find new positions as soon as possible. And that is the end of the presentation. I hope it answered more questions than it raised for all of you. We do have a few minutes. If I can, I'm not sure if I can see, I don't think I can see any questions. So I don't know, Nicole, if you.
Yeah, Christina, it looks like we only had two really that I saw. The first question came through from Home. Sorry, I'm not sure who Home is, but it was, as an owner, how does furlough work and unemployment? If I'm not working, can I go on furlough, and does unemployment still apply?
Yes, so if you are regularly on payroll as a business owner, yes, you can apply for unemployment.
Okay, and the second question was actually from Kim Mosley, the president of the Los Altos Chamber. Kim was asking, does that FMLA notice required by April 1st apply to businesses of any size?
It applies to businesses with less than 500 employees. All of these provisions that we talked about with respect to the paid sick leave as well as the FMLA provision apply to businesses with less than 500 employees. My understanding of the rationale behind it, I mean, it's just one of those things that as they're negotiating and trying to get these things passed, there's always so much give and take going on. The one rationale that I've heard behind this is that, you know, someone who clearly doesn't work out in the workforce and understand how businesses work said, well, companies that have more than 500 employees already provide sufficient sick leave and PTO to their employees, and small businesses don't. And I think all of us small business owners know that we actually do provide nice benefits to our employees when we can. And so there are a lot of small businesses who provide nearly identical time off policies as far as paid sick leave, PTO, things like that, that compare to large organizations. And yet the one thing I do want to point out, in fact, I'm glad this question came up, is that these policies are on top of what you already provide. So, you know, if you look at it and say, well, we already give our employees 80 hours of sick leave. In fact, under the California paid sick leave provision, you know, everyone's already getting sick leave. It's not 80 hours necessarily, but they're definitely already getting sick leave. Well, these requirements are on top of any sick leave and any PTO that you already provide to your employees. So, but that's my understanding of the rationale behind it, is they felt that small employers just didn't have enough sick leave and childcare leave in place to care for the employees during the crisis. So, and in some cases that may be true. And the nice thing about this is that the government is going to be reimbursing businesses. It's just a matter of getting through that process of claiming it on your, making sure that you claim the credit on your taxes so that it doesn't have a long negative impact on the business.
Okay, and the only other question that just came up is, can you email the slides after the meeting? So if you weren't here at the top of the hour, we will be, now Christine did mention she wants to tweak the slides a little bit, and then we'll be sending those out later today, and we will also be hosting them on our website, just figuring out where that will be. And sorry, one more question came up from Ramesh. Are we required to send out written notices of furlough to all employees versus phone call?
So I think that when you put an employee on furlough, you should first talk to them over the phone. You don't want people getting emails telling them, guess what, you're not working anymore. We want to keep the human touch and reach out to your employees, explain the situation, the fact that they're not going to be working, that you hope that this is temporary. And then follow that up in writing, letting them know. I think it's really important with the furloughs, especially if you think you can continue some benefits, and in order for employees to file for unemployment and not have that obligation to look for another job, provide them with a date that you expect the furlough to end. Now, that may be subject to change as isolation mandates change, but do send them something, and you also do have to send them that change of status notice, basically, for unemployment, so that they can file. It has your company address and phone number, which they will need when they file. And you'll also state a reason for the leave. And I encourage you to put as the reason that it's a temporary either pay reduction or furlough, and definitely put in there that it's due to COVID-19, so that when they fill out their unemployment application, they know that that's the reason that they should choose, to help leave that waiting period for them as well. So I say both. Call them on the phone and then follow up with something in writing.
Okay, and last thing, Scott Hunter from the Los Altos Village Association said, is there a required minimum number of employees?
So for all of the provisions that we've talked about, and even the SBA loans, the magic number is 500 employees or less. So if you have less than 500 employees, you are covered by everything that we talked about today. And it goes down to 1 employee.
Okay, and one more from home. For the CARES Act, does the reimbursement of payroll apply to number of employees at the time of the loan or time of February 1st retro?
So it will apply, so it applies on a my understanding is, I'm not a tax professional, but my understanding is that it'll basically apply per employee. There are also some exemptions. So employees that make over $100,000 a year, you will not be reimbursed for their payroll. But it's going to go back to February 15th, so that if you bring someone back who had previously been laid off before the June 30th date, and again, there are some pay parameters at about 75% of pay if there are going to be payroll reductions. So it is based on the actual people that are working for you at the time, and who may have had paid reductions or been laid off, or all the criteria they'll be looking at to determine eligibility. You will also have to show some hardship. They do have a requirement that you show them that the loan is needed, due to a loss of income to the business. There are different criteria for eligibility for even taking out the loan. So again, that's something that you want to work closely with your financial advisor. And my understanding too is that these loans, even though they're federal loans, they're going to be administered by the local entities that usually deal with SBA loans. And so your banks, your credit unions, different financial institutions. So you may want to contact your bank, your credit union, or anyone else who you may have an SBA loan through right now, and they can help you.
Okay, I think we're just at 3 o'clock now, so I think we will wrap this up. Thank you so much, Christine, for presenting, and thank you everyone who attended. And Christine, did you say you had information about contacting you directly?
Yeah, so I told Nicole that she's welcome to leave my email address available for all of you. If you have specific questions and you want to send them to me, I will be happy to answer your questions for you. I can't guarantee what the turnaround time will be. It may not be immediate, but I will absolutely every day go through questions and answer as much as I possibly can, because I understand that this is very overwhelming. A lot of these new, especially the paid sick leave and the FMLA, are things that small businesses typically do not have to deal with. And so I know that it's a lot of information. I know it's really a lot to go through. So as you're going through all of this, please do let me know if you have specific questions, and I'll help to the best of my ability.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Stay healthy out there. Try not to go too stir crazy in your homes, and we look forward to seeing you all out and about once we can get back out and about. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much, Christine.